This is Business Therapy, healing businesses from the inside out through communication and emotional intelligence. I am Christine Salvo, your host today, and my co-host Diane Hansen is traveling, so she will not be able to join us. So today we're super excited to have our guest, Natalie Davidson, on. She was born in New Mexico and raised in Sparks, Nevada. She has a 20-year-old son and a boyfriend of 15 years. Growing up, Natalie rode horses and got involved with equine therapy, which led her to the mental health field. Although she had worked in sales and marketing of various fields for decades, mental health had taken the cake. Natalie found her calling by working in business development for mental health treatment facilities. She worked as a community liaison and a director of business development. After being in the industry for 5 years, Natalie has decided she'll never leave. She makes friends and gets to help save lives. So welcome to the show, Natalie. So happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you.
Excellent. So I always like to start with, you started in equine therapy yourself and really kind of got to feel the experiences of being with the horses. Would you tell our listeners a tiny bit about that? I'm sure that, you know, people have been curious and maybe they don't really know what that is. Can you kind of tell us something?
Absolutely. I honestly didn't know what it was until I was doing it one day. I had a colleague of mine and one of my students' mothers, because I used to teach riding lessons. One of my students' mothers was an equine therapist, and she talked to me a lot about how the horses assist in reading body language and communicating for you and helping you communicate as a person who has experienced trauma, depression, anxiety, things like that, and different mental health struggles that people suffer from, and how the horse can really be kind of that between a person and their therapist.
Ooh, I love it. Yeah, I've referred many people to equine therapy. I have not actually done it myself. So what did you get from the experience yourself? What did you experience? What did you see? What did you witness? What did you feel?
I think the biggest epiphany I had as a horse person of decades was just being around the horses, how therapeutic that was just in itself, and how just their soul and their four-legged person is just healing, just a sniff to the face or just a nuzzle. It's right there, is just true love. It's unbridled. Ha It, just leaves nothing behind and nothing is filtered when you're dealing with horses.
Yeah, I've really heard that. I know that it's very, very powerful, very powerful. So I was kind of thinking that could segue into our topic today, which is collaborative versus top-down management, and almost using equine therapy as our way of explaining. So with the horse, can you tell the horse what to do and expect it to just respond to you?
No.
I didn't think so.
And it's fun because, you're dealing with animals anywhere from 800-900 pounds and up, and that is not something that you really are able to push your weight around and say you do this or else. Sometimes there is, but that involves abusive tactics to which nobody ever wants to really voluntarily get into. From a top-down standpoint, no, top-down does not work with horses. Just because it's more of a team a team setting that has to take place in a collaboration. I like to tell my students when they're first learning to ride, and when my more advanced students are first getting a new horse or teaching a baby horse, what you're doing is you're teaching a language. And you have to learn how to interpret body language and voice language and just feelings and things like that. So I do believe that that's a lot of what the collaboration is about, is really taking a moment to stop and understand and listen to each other and then act on what you're hearing.
So it's really interesting that we get to kind of use this as our way of explaining this, because the one thing, obviously, there's a few different things, but one thing that sticks out, the difference between horses and humans, is the language, is the ability to actually use words. But sometimes that can almost get in the way, right? Just because we have words doesn't actually mean we know what other people are saying because we all have different meanings and associations to words, right?
Especially today.
Yeah, I'm in this group and they're constantly saying, okay, explain what you mean by that word. Like last night, someone said, I have to have respect. And they're like, great, elaborate. What does that mean? Because it doesn't mean the same thing to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So just because we have words that we use doesn't mean we're really communicating. So that whole reading body language, going slow, reading that subtle energy body like the horses, that's really what we call emotional intelligence, is going slow enough to listen, picking up on the nuances, picking up on the energy, and then like working with that, right?
Mm-hmm. And
So
that's really awesome. I've never had a word to put to that.
yeah. So working with horses really does, it does increase that sixth sense almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of it's not something I feel on my body, taste, touch, or see. It's something that I just kind of know. It's almost that knowing. It's very, very subtle. So
You hone your intuition so much on the back of a horse, and even just on the ground with a horse, because you have to, and you have to take because you have to take key to or take notice to what the horse is doing, also because they are a prey animal, and they live in fight or flight all the time. So I think that also, again, with the emotional intelligence and just that they're always communicating with us and checking in all the time.
So what happens if you take your hand off the wheel? What happens if you don't check in with the horse, or you're not so intuitive or connected? How does the horse typically respond to that?
I think there are so many determining factors to that. Obviously, your surroundings, if you're already in a safe space and the horse is used to that space, then the horse will allow you to take your hand off the wheel and just help guide you and remind you, hey, this is what we're doing. If you're in a wide open space with a young animal, then that can be kind of dangerous. Mm-hmm. But I feel like in every instance, you should be able to take your hand off the wheel if you're communicating correctly.
Okay, I like this. So I'm going to segue this into a little bit of a conversation I had earlier in session. And we were talking about safety for a child with special needs. And I said, well, I love this metaphor. If you take me out to the middle of a field by myself with no music and you say, dance, I'm probably going to feel pretty awkward, vulnerable, and start questioning you. Why do I need to dance out in the middle of a field by myself? What's going on, right? Mm-hmm. But if you take me to the dance floor of a wedding with a DJ and other people dancing, I'm going to be like, woohoo, let's dance. So we were really talking about how boundaries give us comfort. It tells us how to act and how to respond. And something that's normal in one situation isn't normal in another, but it's the same behavior. It's all dancing. But in one area, I'm going to feel more comfortable. In another area, I'm not. So I want to take your analogy here of the horse. If it's in a comfortable place already, it's just gentle guidance and reminding. How would you use that same thing in a management context? How would you talk to our listeners really about using your horse therapy experience while also kind of translating that into how can we use this to manage people in our businesses differently and more effectively?
I think the word you used is huge, is taking your hand off the wheel. So in allowing your team to be autonomous in decision making. And also in the event that there is an error, gentle guidance versus punitive reactions.
Can you give me an example of that? Like what would be, because some people just don't, we don't experience ourselves. I always like to say that, there's a reason someone has to tell us something's in our teeth. And it's because our eyes can't see our own teeth, right?
Mm-hmm,
so we'll rock around with food in our teeth and not know a darn thing. So we get that lovely glance and we go, oh my God, nobody told me. But the truth is we only see ourselves certain ways. So let's say we have a manager that thinks like, well, I'm pretty gentle. I do gentle guidance. Let's give a few examples or maybe some ideas or what that looks like so that they can really compare and get a good feeling of that.
I think gentle guidance in a collaborative management environment is conversing about what an outcome should be and really communicating that clearly. Again, it's that language and making sure that everybody is being heard and that everybody is being understood. And then I think, being able to, as a manager, taking your hand off the wheel, allowing your team to move forward with the suggestion and with that conversation, and with the understanding that everybody is on the same page. We understand what the mission is or what the project is, and we understand each other's language. So what the expectations are. And then I think the gentle guidance piece comes back to, in the event that you're doing really, really well, reinforcing that. In the event that you need redirecting, reinforcing that, but doing so in a manner of constructive words. And I don't even want to say constructive criticism because I think it's become such a cliche term.
It's almost like in marriage counseling when I say, use an I statement. We're only talking about ourselves. And the person goes, well, I think you're a jerk. It's like, nope, that you used that
That
wrong.
did not work.
You said I, but that's not how that works, right? So I'm kind of getting the feeling that you're saying constructive criticism is taken that same way, where it's like, I'm going to say something really weird and call it constructive. And it's like,
yes,
that's actually,
exactly.
That's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So,
And I think, having candor is important in a collaborative relationship. Having, truth, but with forward momentum. I don't want to say something to you as a partner on your leadership team that's going to make you move backwards. You always want forward momentum.
Well, I'm thinking about this horse. I'm loving that we got to start with horses, because you said so many key things. And being a therapist, I think horses aren't far from humans. So, this idea that they're prey animals and they're always stuck in hypervigilance. They're always stuck in fight or flight. A lot of humans are too. So you've been in the mental health field, you've worked, you've seen. How often do you think people in the workplace are really kind of coming from that place too? They're really coming from this survival mode, especially in a time where employment might feel scarce, people are scared. You're going to get a little bit more of a spooked horse, using the metaphor, in the workplace as well, when people aren't feeling safe. So we need to make sure that we're setting up that safe place first, that we're almost expecting everyone to be spooked a little bit easier than we think that they might. And then approaching a little bit more accordingly, right?
Absolutely.
So I love that saying, you never know what people are going through. Be kind.
Yeah,
because you really never know, you just don't. And until you get under the covers with people and kind of start to peel away the layers, it's like, we have no clue. So you don't know that day that you talked to your employee using constructive criticism was the day that they got some of the worst news of their life. And that they just weren't in a place to handle it. And now all of a sudden when they're reacting or from that place, it seems pretty weird, out of character, but still it's a problem. And so having this gentler approach to management, not necessarily, the snowflake soft of everything needs to be handled with kid gloves, but definitely more the approach that, hey, these are humans. This is their job. They care about it because they keep showing up. They want to do well. How can I actually take them to the next level? How can I support them? How can I learn more about what's on their plate? And even finding out maybe why they made the mistake. If you have bad news, even if you're going through a breakup, there's tons of neuroscience now that's backing up the idea that there is such a thing as a true broken heart, and there's a withdrawal process to ending relationships.
Sure, you're mourning something that died.
Yeah, full on chemical withdrawals, similar to that of somebody that uses hardcore drugs.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty wild, right?
Yeah.
So when someone says, well, I'm going through a breakup, a lot of the feedback I hear as a therapist is people are like, buck up, get on with it, blah, 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 blah. If it's a death, we're a lot more generous.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're like, oh, that's that fatal final one. But as me and my best friend like to point out, sometimes a divorce or a breakup is harder than a death, because you know that person is still out there. They're living their life and they're doing it happily without you.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
But being able to take that into the management, being able to take that into your approach, similar to that of a horse, similar to that of an animal that can't communicate. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to touch back on the collaborative fight or flight versus the top down fight or flight.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of managers like the idea of keeping their employees in check by always keeping their job in question and never providing them that safe space. Where a collaborative leader doesn't want you to have that fight or flight. They want you to have the safety space so you can feel motivated to then continuously kind of reprove yourself in your job versus always fighting for your job.
Yeah. I love that you just mentioned that. And that is so true. So security and safety are basic human needs.
Yeah.
And playing with someone's safety and security is, just like you said, it's going to keep them in hypervigilance. But for the managers that are listening out there where this might be your approach, we're not shaming you, we're not blaming you, we're just trying to offer a different perspective. So from that perspective, people can't perform at their best, unfortunately. They're stuck in actually their lowest level of functioning, which is basically, I just need to get through this day.
Yeah.
And when people stay in the I just need to get through this day, it starts to lead to something called adrenal fatigue and chronic stress. And then all of a sudden now they're extremely tired. They can't perform at the level they wanted to. Their adrenals are flooding them. The stress is flooding the brain. So they're not thinking straight and their performance goes down the tube. So strategically, it's a completely failed system strategically. What you really want is that safety, that security, and that people feel invested in building. So if I'm here, I can be here for a long time. I can decorate my workspace. I can make relationships and have relationships with my coworkers. I can feel like my day is spent doing something that I enjoy, that I'm part of, and I have a vision and investment in outside of my family life. You know, some people call work their second home. They have a work husband, they have a work wife, but these are all words of bonding. These are all words of future. Those are future oriented words, right?
Yes, yes.
So tell us a little bit more about the top-down approach and kind of like the alternatives. So like if you did it this way, almost like eat this, not that. So the top down is typically a little bit more authoritarian. Maybe, the picture that I always see in top down economy is the triangle, right? There's one person at the top and 100 people at the bottom. And the person at the top has never done the job as the person at the bottom, but makes all the decisions. And most of the time it doesn't make sense. I've had a lot of jobs and I've been like, do they even know what I do? Like, why would they make a policy like that? It does not make, like, it literally ties your hands to do your job, right? So maybe you could talk a little bit about top down versus collaborative and what the differences are.
Oh man, this is a big topic. In my experience with top-down management, and to be really, really honest with you, Christine, I don't have a ton of experience with it because I'm intolerant.
Beautiful. That's actually what I wanted to hear. Yes.
It does not work for me, and I know this, and I physically and mentally start deteriorating when I'm in a situation like that, and and my poor family gets the brunt of it. So I try to steer clear of environments like that. Even if they're, paying me top dollar, I feel like my mental state in knowing that I'm contributing and knowing that I'm making a difference is really what makes me continue to push forward and to move forward and to grow professionally and personally. So the top-down management, man, I had a boss one time who, because I'm a strong person, just by nature, and I am not afraid of people, I was his punching bag, not literally, but
Right.
he yelled at me every single day for no reasons at all.
Yeah.
And I would like to take a pause and say, there's always a reason for something. But with this man, he literally one time was screaming at me so close to my face that my face was being spat on. And his wife called and he's like, "Oh man, hon, I think I need a Snickers."
Oh,
And I
wow.
paused and I went, huh. So that was just like, I literally am just standing here taking the brunt of whatever he's frustrated with. And he has the audacity to blame it on him being hungry.
Right.
So 1 month later, I left that job.
Okay. I was like, if you didn't quit immediately, I hope that you quit soon after.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, yeah. And I agree with you. The top down doesn't work for me either. And I think that that's becoming more and more and more true. And that is really why I wanted to discuss this topic, because for our top down managers, again, this isn't to scold you, blame you, but we are saying it's really time to try something new. And that employees, you know, you're not a low level employee. You're not the entry level girl. So if you're experiencing this as middle and upper management, it's still affecting you negatively, right? Sometimes we think of top down, like I said, is, you know, all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom. But we miss that mid-level management issue where, you know, you're getting the direction from the top, and then you're having to enforce these policies that you don't necessarily believe in, while you're also not being treated well. So you're most likely not going to treat the next layer down well. And if you do, you might even get in trouble for that. I remember before my years as a counselor, I was working in retail, and I'll never forget, there was a manager, and I was a supervisor, and we were walking the floor. It was a clothing department store, and I will never forget what this woman did. She saw a shirt, and there was an employee behind us, and she literally threw it on the ground, looked at the girl and said, "Pick it up." And I will never forget going, "I'm getting out of here." Like,
I can't even do that as a consumer.
You're the manager of a discount clothing store. You haven't made it to the top. You're not eating off of gold spoons. And even if you were, you still don't have a right to treat one of your employees that way.
Yeah.
I just remember holding my breath and being like, because, you know, at one point I did look up to her. I was young, and it was my first supervisor position. And I was kind of like, "Hey, take me under your wing." And when I witnessed that, I was like, okay, to manage under her, that's the expectation. And I can't actually lower myself to that.
It's that whole idea of kicking the dog.
Yeah, for that $8.50 an hour at the time.
No.
And, you know, of course, I'm getting to know people personally, and I'm like, she's got enough on her plate, man. You know, she's working a part-time minimum wage job. She can't pay her bills, and now she has to put up with you. Like, oh yeah, that's great. And I say that really on purpose, because we need to hear these things. Listen, if it's a minimum wage job, treat your people like gold. They're not making it. They can't pay their bills. They have 1,000,001 things on their plate, and it's not your problem. You can't solve it. But the least you can do is treat people well, with kindness. You know, treating people with that ultimate respect of whatever position you're in. You're a human being, and you're trying to make your way, and I have empathy and compassion for you. And I hope you can throw that my way too when I need it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I do know that as I've been out in the industry, and, you know, part of my job today is, I laugh because I literally am a professional friend maker, albeit that's not my title. That's what I do. I try to make people's lives easier, their job easier, and I try to help people, you know, find their way into a better life. And part of that is I get the honor of going into people's practices and different treatment centers. And we just finished October, and October was Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And there was a lot posted on social media, and there's a lot of different posters, motivational posters, and the iceberg poster is what I like to, this one literally is what I saw, was this is what people, and it was about domestic violence. And the little tip outside of the water was what people on the outside were seeing this person going through. Like, this person's not being abused. It's not domestic, this isn't the case. But then under the water, it was physical abuse, verbal abuse, shaming, and all of these things that really did equal domestic violence. And I take this back to some of my own personal experiences with employers. And I think to myself, I would really like to have a moment of clarity and real motivation, I suppose, to go back and really share with that person what that did to me and how that behavior affected me, and how can we change together. But it is, I mean, in a sense, and I don't want to shame and I don't want to point fingers at people who have this management style, but like you said, it is a call for change. That it is abusive. And it should not be tolerated any longer.
And honestly, as a therapist, I tell people to quit their jobs all the time. Not that I can offer, it's not that I offer advice or tell people actually what to do, but I literally will say, it sounds like the work stress is really your main issue. Let's look at your budget. Let's start looking at what you really need to make. And I'm always saying, like, if you get out of that situation, I bet 80% of your symptoms will go away. Because it's your body typically telling you, this isn't right, this isn't okay, I don't want to do it. But then we have that motivation for the financial, right? Like, I have to. And so much of that workplace abuse, really, what you're talking about, is financially motivated. It is, the reason it's abusive is because it is an exchange of power. And we have to understand that abuse is all about exchange of power. So when you have an abusive boss, it's because you are financially dependent on their company and they feel like they have the power to do so.
Right.
So a collaborative manager understands that there's other jobs, that if they don't treat you well, you're going to leave, that it costs a lot of money to train and invest in people. And then it's more strategic in the end to train and keep people happy than it is to take that power approach and abuse, which we talked about earlier, and you said it yourself, it decreased your productivity 100%. It just makes people shrivel up and be really uncomfortable and then feel stuck, and then the mental health issues start to compound. So I really love this conversation today. I think it's one that needs to be had, and we did kind of go all over the place, but I think we covered so much when it comes to human behavior, management, and business.
Yeah. I think so too.
Awesome. So Natalie, since you are a professional friend maker, if any of our listeners want to get a hold of you, if they have any questions or kind of want to bend your ear about mental health management, things like that, what is your email they could get a hold of you at?
My email is SF Equine Therapy. That is Sam Frank, equine, like a horse, EQUINE, and then therapy, THERAPY @gmail.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you.
Awesome. And this has been Business Therapy, healing businesses from the inside out through communication and emotional intelligence. I was your host today, Christine Salvo, licensed marriage and family therapist, certified hypnotherapist, and certified mediator. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye. This is Business Therapy, healing businesses from the inside out through communication.